Behold, the official White House Christmas card from 1993. 1993 was the first year of the Bill Clinton presidency, and that year's Christmas card featured the president and the first lady and a Christmas tree in the state dining room. This Christmas card from 1993 was seen by Republicans in Congress at the time as a scandal, as evidence that Bill Clinton was corrupt and criminal and was guilty of abusing the office of the presidency. It was all evident right there in the Christmas card, because the way the Clinton White House addressed its Christmas cards was that they used a computer database. A database set up in the White House social office that included the names of everybody the Clintons came in contact with once the Clinton presidency started. It was a database of about 350,000 names. If you were on that list, you got a Christmas card. And although the White House social office contended that the database was only used to figure out who should get Christmas cards, congressional Republicans knew it was a scandal. They suspected something nefarious. They thought the Christmas card list was somehow corrupt, criminal. It was an abuse of power. And so Republicans held hearings into the Christmas cards. Clinton administration officials were hauled before the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee to answer for this evil White House Christmas card list and explain how it was evidence of improper partisan campaign activity or something. Republicans called up 34 witnesses to give depositions about the Christmas card list. They demanded more than 40,000 documents about the Christmas card list. They held days of hearings on the Christmas card list. And they accuse liberals of waging a war on Christmas. Yes, despite all the hearings and the depositions and all the rest of it, the Republican investigations into the White House Christmas card turned up nothing. Sometimes a Christmas card really is just a Christmas card. Officially, that scandal-seeking fishing expedition from the Clinton era is known as the investigation of the conversion of the $1.7 million centralized White House computer system known as the White House Database and related matters. Unofficially, though, it is known as the time that House Republicans spent years investigating Bill and Hillary Clinton's Christmas card. Seriously. The guy who led that committee that investigated the Clinton Christmas card was this guy. His name is Dan Burton. He was a Republican congressman from the great state of Indiana. And for years, Dan Burton's whole reason for being was to try to find a way to take down the presidency of Bill Clinton using the powers of his own office in the House. He once described President Clinton as a scumbag. He said that on the record. To give you a little taste of the Dan Burton mindset, he convinced himself that the president and the first lady, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, were not just bad people, they were killers. He decided that they murdered their deputy White House counsel, a man named Vince Foster. And to help prove it, Dan Burton went into his backyard with a gun and shot at either a watermelon or a cantaloupe, depending on who you believe, in order to prove that Vince Foster's death was a Clinton hit. It was a murder and not a suicide, which he could tell because of something about shooting a watermelon.
We, at my house, with a homicide detective, tried to recreate a head and fired a 38 4-inch barrel into that to see if the sound could be heard from 100 yards away, even though there was an earth mover moving around in the background making all kinds of racket, and you could hear the bullet clearly.
So obviously, Bill Clinton is a murderer. Dan Burton's committee investigated claims that the Clintons were traitors, that they were selling information to the Chinese government in exchange for money. He held hearings alleging that the Clinton administration was selling burial plots in Arlington National Cemetery in exchange for campaign contributions. He held hearings alleging that the Clinton White House was surreptitiously altering videotapes of fundraisers in order to hide some sort of wrongdoing that Dan Burton imagined was happening at the fundraisers. Dan Burton suggested at one point that he should hire lip readers to examine those tapes to find the photoshopping. During his tenure as chairman of the Government Reform and Oversight Committee, Dan Burton issued more than 1,000 subpoenas to 141 different Clintonites. In one case, Dan Burton's investigators even managed to subpoena the wrong man. That one was really embarrassing. Dan Burton's committee was so busy passing out subpoenas like party favors that they accidentally subpoenaed the wrong guy by confusing two similar-sounding Asian names. Yeah, that's nice. So that was the summer of subpoena. That was 1997. That was how the Republicans thought they would use control of the House to try to destroy a presidency that they did not like, as well as some watermelons. Well, now, 16 years and one Democratic president later, the Republican summer of subpoena appears to be back. The Republican who has Dan Burton's old job as chairman of the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee is now this man on your right, Republican Congressman Darrell Issa of California. But if you saw this whole thing unfold the first time, the plot this time will seem familiar, even if some of the faces are changed. Some of the faces are changed. One of the latest targets of the Republicans' latest round of subpoenas in our new subpoena summer is Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff when she was Secretary of State, a woman named Cheryl Mills. Cheryl Mills, it turns out, is no stranger to this committee that's now investigating her. Here she is in 1997, testifying before the same House committee on the great White House Christmas card scandal that was supposed to drive Bill Clinton out of office once and for all. Cheryl Mills was Bill Clinton's White House deputy counsel at the time. And now House Republicans say they would please like to talk to her again. It's going to be a long, hot, stupid summer. The summer of subpoena is back. How'd that work out last time? Joining us now is Steve Kornacki, the host of MSNBC's excellent weekend morning show, Up with Steve Kornacki. Steve's also a senior writer at Salon. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So the summer of subpoena night, you could maybe put it on 1998 too, but 1997 I think of as really the heyday. How did that work out for Republicans last time?
I think it was part of it was part of a pattern that went back to when Clinton took office in 1993. I always tell people I can remember a month into his term, being a kid, even in Massachusetts, and seeing a bumper sticker on a car in front of us that said impeach Clinton. And that mindset was there, and it was sort of animating the right for the entire time he was president. So there was sort of this endless search for we're going to get something, we're going to get something, we're going to get something. After the 96 campaign, I think it accelerated a bit, A, because Clinton had been reelected. So now you're not going to be able to beat him at the polls, and he's not going to be on the ballot again. B, you had, the Whitewater Independent Council then. They were on, I think, their third independent council at that point, who was Ken Starr. We know what that ultimately progressed to. And then you also had some fundraising controversies that came out of the 1996 campaign about, did China try to influence the election? And Republicans convinced themselves that Clinton got reelected because China put money into the election. And so that really, I think, kind of added oil to the fire, or gas to the fire, whatever the expression is. And so when you got to the summer of 97 and then into 98, I think Lewinsky kind of fed off of that. It was reaching what Republicans thought was critical mass, and what at that point had been sort of a 5-year campaign to find, the smoking gun that was going to, take Clinton out of office. And again, I think what really, it was 6 months after the summer of 97 when you got the Lewinsky thing. That's when I think it went really berserk. But yes, the end game to all of this was in the 1998 midterm elections. For the first time since James Monroe was president, the White House party actually gained seats in a 6-year election. Nobody saw that coming, and it was so shocking to Republicans that 2 days after that election, Newt Gingrich had to step down as speaker.
So they went completely hog wild. They were presumably encouraged by their base to keep going in Republican land, which actually was more porous than it is now. Now it is even more isolated from the rest of media and the rest of political discussion. There was something going on in the internal Republican feedback loop that told them that they were both onto something and that this was a good thing to do politically, but the electorate totally disagreed. That
was it. I think because that mindset existed from basically the start of the Clinton presidency, that this is an illegitimate president. That was basically the mindset on the right. There was this assumption that eventually, if we keep digging, we're going to find something that will make the rest of the country see it. And I think, yes, this sort of closed information loop that exists on the right wasn't as developed in the 1990s as it was today, but it was very similar, that you had talk radio, you had Rush Limbaugh, probably had more listeners in the 90s than he had today. So if you were a conservative in the 1990s, you were going to be celebrated. You were going to be able to raise big money in the grassroots. You were going to be, celebrated on talk radio. You didn't really have Fox News until the second term. But that basic, problem that I think exists on the right that sort of isolates the right from sort of more mainstream public opinion, that's been amplified today. And so it's reached a point today for Republicans where either, there's an incentive to cater directly to it. You're going to be a hero within the Republican universe. You're going to be safe from a primary challenge if you are actively engaging in this stuff. Or if you're a Republican and you don't believe in this stuff, or you don't think this is where the party should be spending its time, you better keep that to yourself, because if you speak up and you say that, then you're going to be, it becomes almost like a tribal thing. That's the mark of a rhino. A rhino would say, we shouldn't be, looking into this. We should be going after, jobs, we should go after the economy, whatever it is. And then you're going to be the victim of a primary challenge.
Well, but do Republicans have an alternate history of how this turned out? Because, I think that's part of what's going on with Democrats when they're looking at the sort of scandal mongering that's happening on the right now. Like, nobody outside of the Foxiverse thinks that Benghazi is a real scandal. Democrats aren't very concerned about Republicans trying to make it one, because I think they look back and think, 98, they overreached, it actually helped us. Do Republicans not not see it that way? Do they tell themselves a different story?
I've heard, it's interesting because I have heard, I mean, Newt Gingrich actually gave an interview a week or two ago where he said, yeah, I think we overreached in 1998. How's that for a quote? I said, well, yeah, you would know. You lost your job because of it. So I think there are some people in the party who either lived through it, and there are some more sort of strategic-minded, pragmatic people in the party who are trying to put the brakes on this a little bit. But again, you run the risk, the louder you speak up on that. It's very easy. One thing I've learned following, living, and covering politics for 20 years is it's very easy to revise history.
Yeah.
And I see it happen all the time. I've seen the history of the 1990s revised, where you would never know that we had these balanced budgets at the end of the 1990s that were the result of a tax hike, 2 tax hikes in the start of the 1990s. To listen to any Republican tell the story of the balanced budgets at the end of the 90s, it's because we got a Republican Congress in 94 and we got some deal in 97. They forget, no, there were no Republicans who voted for it in 93, and there was George Bush Sr. who committed treason to the conservative cause in 1990. But that's been, all this history can be revised so easily.
It is easier to revise history than it is to stop the mob with the pitchforks when it is happening.
Right.
In terms of political incentives. Steve Kornacki, Up with Steve Kornacki, MSNBC's Weekend Morning Show, and a senior writer at Salon. Steve, thanks a lot. It's great to see you.
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back.